Hello and welcome. This is Yon Cheku with NSM TV, bringing you the latest news. The release of an audio recording between Hungarian Foreign Minister Peter Szijjártó and his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov has sparked controversy, suggesting efforts to assist Moscow regarding EU sanctions. The case arises at a sensitive political moment for Hungary, amid growing accusations of close ties with Russia. A recently published audio has placed Hungary at the center of a diplomatic scandal, raising questions about its relations with Russia and its stance on European Union sanctions. The audio concerns a recorded phone call between Hungarian Foreign Minister Peter Szijjártó and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, released by an investigative portal. In the recording, Lavrov asks the Hungarian minister to intervene for the removal of an individual connected to a Russian oligarch, specifically Gulbahor Ismailova, from the sanctions list. In response, Szijjártó expresses willingness to assist, confirming that Hungary, together with Slovakia, is preparing a proposal within the EU to remove her from the sanctions list. He even emphasizes that they will do everything possible to achieve this, linking the process to the next sanctions review period. The release of this conversation comes amid increased pressure on the Hungarian minister, following reports that he may have shared sensitive information with Russia during EU meetings in Brussels. These developments are intensifying political debate in Hungary, especially ahead of the parliamentary elections on April 12th, where relations with Moscow are a central issue. According to EU rules, sanctions are renewed every 6 months with a full consensus of member states. Ismailova's name was removed from the list in March 2025, along with several other Russian individuals, raising suspicions of political lobbying influence in the process. Szijjártó has not denied the authenticity of the conversation, but has downplayed its significance, stating that his positions have been consistent in both public and private communications. He has also accused foreign intelligence services of eavesdropping on his calls. Meanwhile, the European Commission described the matter as concerning and requested clarification from Budapest regarding the positions of its representatives in EU institutions. Hungary and Slovakia continue to maintain close relations with Russia, despite the EU's general policy of isolating Moscow after its invasion of Ukraine. This latest development is expected to impact Hungary's political climate and its relations with European partners, while the debate over Russian influence in Europe remains open. Qatar declares that the future of the Strait of Hormuz should be determined by regional countries and international partners only once security is restored, as the passage is currently closed due to military operations. Meanwhile, escalating conflict has led to attacks on infrastructure and energy vessels, increasing risks for the region and the global economy. Qatar calls for a joint decision on the future of the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most important energy maritime routes, amid escalating tensions in the region. During a press conference in Doha, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Majed Al-Ansari emphasized that the strait is currently closed due to military operations and that discussions on its future cannot take place under these conditions. He stressed that this waterway does not belong to a single country, but is a shared space for all regional countries and international partners. Therefore, any decision should be made collectively once escalation ends and security is restored. The Qatari official also warned of the significant risk posed by attacks on civilian infrastructure, highlighting that Gulf countries heavily rely on facilities for drinking water supply. Attacks on these installations constitute a direct threat to citizens' lives across the region and must be avoided at all costs. He added that Gulf countries share a unified stance on seeking de-escalation and the end of hostilities, while Doha supports any diplomatic initiative aimed at bringing the parties back to the negotiating table. According to him, conflicts are always resolved through dialogue, and the sooner this is achieved, the better it is for the region's peoples. The European Union considers Israel's decision to pass a law allowing the death penalty for Palestinians convicted by military courts as very worrying. According to the EU, this measure violates the right to life and contradicts international and democratic principles. The European Union has strongly reacted to Israel's decision to approve a law allowing the death penalty for Palestinians found guilty by military courts of lethal attacks. During a press conference in Brussels, European Commission spokesperson Anouar El Anouni called the development very worrying and a clear backward step. He emphasized that the introduction of the death penalty, combined with discriminatory nature of the law, conflicts with the fundamental values upheld by the EU. According to him, the EU opposes capital punishment under any circumstances, viewing it as a direct violation of the right to life, one of the core principles guiding EU policy and positions. The spokesperson also noted that this stance has been clear from the beginning, even before Israel passed the law. He called on Israeli authorities to respect their prior principled position, obligations under international law, and commitments to democratic principles. Brussels' reaction comes amid high tensions in the region, as Israel's decision has sparked international criticism and concern over its potential impact on human rights and regional stability. The EU reiterates that the protection of life and respect for international standards must remain central in all decision-making, warning that such measures may further worsen the situation and undermine efforts for peace. Italy has refused permission for U.S. military aircraft to use Sigonella Air Base in Sicily for operations toward the Middle East. The decision comes amid domestic political debate and concerns about involvement in a U.S.-Israel-Iran conflict. Italy has denied U.S. military aircraft permission to use Sigonella Air Base in Sicily as a stopover point for operations to the Middle East. According to sources close to the matter, some American bombers were expected to land at the base in eastern Sicily before proceeding to the tense region, but authorization was not granted. Reports indicate the request was not submitted according to prescribed procedures, and Italian military authorities were not consulted, as required by agreements regulating U.S. base usage in Italy. The Italian Ministry of Defense has not yet issued an official comment on the matter, while the development has sparked a broad political debate within the country. Since the outbreak of the U.S.-Israel conflict with Iran, left-wing opposition parties have demanded that the government block the use of Italian military bases to avoid direct involvement in the war. Meanwhile, the right-wing government of Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni has stated that any such request will be reviewed and will require parliamentary authorization, emphasizing the importance of legal procedures and national sovereignty. Sigonella Air Base, one of the most strategic points of the U.S. military presence in the Mediterranean, has historically played a key role in NATO and U.S. operations in the region. The recent refusal is seen as a signal of Italy's increased caution to avoid direct involvement in a widening conflict that threatens regional stability. U.S. President Donald Trump is reportedly willing to end the war with Iran, even if the Strait of Hormuz remains largely closed. Media reports suggest that the U.S. aims to focus on military objectives and diplomatic pressure while avoiding further escalation. U.S. President Donald Trump is considering ending the war with Iran, even if one of the world's most important maritime routes, the Strait of Hormuz, remains closed. According to a report by American media, Trump informed his aides that forcibly opening this vital trade route could extend the conflict beyond the planned 4 to 6 weeks. Therefore, the administration's strategy appears to have shifted towards achieving key military objectives without immediately focusing on fully reopening the strait. The report highlights that the U.S. aims to weaken Iran's naval fleet and missile capabilities, while simultaneously applying diplomatic pressure on Tehran to restore freedom of navigation in this strategic corridor. If these efforts fail, Washington may ask European allies and Gulf countries to take the lead in reopening it. Military options remain on the table, though they are not considered an immediate priority. Meanwhile, Trump's public statements on the conflict have been inconsistent. He has warned of completely destroying Iran's energy infrastructure if an agreement is not reached quickly. In parallel, the U.S. has increased its military presence in the region. The USS Tripoli warship and marine units have entered the area, while elements of U.S. air and ground forces are being deployed. Reports indicate the possibility of sending up to 10,000 additional troops is under investigation. The U.S. administration is also evaluating other scenarios, including a complex operation to take control of Iran's uranium reserves. However, White House officials emphasized that restoring normal navigation in the Strait of Hormuz remains a goal, but not a primary military priority at this stage. Iran rejects the ceasefire plan proposed by the United States, labeling it excessive, unrealistic, and unreasonable. Tehran emphasizes it has not engaged in direct negotiations with Washington and prioritizes defense against ongoing attacks. Iran has rejected the latest ceasefire plan proposed by the U.S., calling it unacceptable and detached from reality. During a press conference in Tehran, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Esmail Baghaei stated that the material presented by the U.S., known as a 15-point plan, contains excessive, unrealistic, and unreasonable demands. He emphasized that Iran has maintained a clear stance from the beginning and has not conducted direct negotiations with Washington. Baghaei said that regional initiatives for peace are welcome, but clarified that Iran was not part of some meetings organized by other countries, including a framework initiated by Pakistan. According to him, Tehran's decisions will be made public only when a clear conclusion is reached, underscoring Iranian authorities' full confidence in their objectives. Asked about a political solution to the conflict, he stated that intensified U.S. and Israeli attacks have forced Iran to focus on defense, accusing adversaries of attempting to strike scientific bases and cultural heritage sites. Meanwhile, clashes on the ground continue. Airstrikes have been reported in several Iranian cities, while the Revolutionary Guard announced a new wave of missile and drone attacks on U.S. and Israeli targets in the region. The Iranian spokesperson reiterated that the country's operations are not aimed at neighboring states, but only at U.S. military bases, which, according to him, were used to attack Iran in violation of international law. He called on regional countries not to allow their territories to be used for attacks against Iran. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has announced online talks with the United States to discuss the possibility of an agreement and steps toward peace. He warns that Ukraine will continue to respond to Russian attacks if a ceasefire is not reached, particularly on energy infrastructure. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky announced that on Wednesday, online talks will be held with U.S. representatives in a renewed efforts to advance peace negotiations. Speaking from Bucha during a commemorative summit for victims of the Russian invasion, Zelensky stated that the meeting will include other important international figures, including NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, as well as other American officials and political representatives. According to him, discussions will focus on the current phase of negotiations and the possibility of a tripartite agreement, or at least organizing such a meeting. Zelensky emphasized that he will present Ukraine's proposal for a ceasefire linked to halting attacks on energy infrastructure, requesting that this proposal be conveyed to Russia. He added that so far, there have been no signals from Moscow in this regard. The Ukrainian president warned that if Russia continues its attacks, Ukraine will respond in kind. But if an agreement is reached to stop airstrikes on energy facilities, Kyiv is also ready to act reciprocally. He also stated that Russia is trying to exert pressure on the United States, especially ahead of internal U.S. political developments, expressing hope that negotiations will be guided by logic rather than emotions. 3 United Nations peacekeepers have been killed in southern Lebanon in 2 separate incidents, amid escalating clashes between Israel and Hezbollah. The UN has launched investigations into the events, warning of significant danger to international forces on the ground. The situation in southern Lebanon is becoming increasingly dangerous as 3 UN peacekeepers lost their lives in 2 separate incidents within a few hours. According to the UN mission in Lebanon, UNIFIL, 2 peacekeepers were killed when their vehicle was hit by an explosion near Bani Hayyan, while 2 others were injured and are receiving hospital treatment. Another soldier died the previous night after a shell struck a UN airbase near Adshid al-Qusayr, severely injuring a colleague. UNIFIL spokesperson Candice Ardiel stated that 2 investigations have been opened to determine the origin and nature of the explosions, with results to be communicated to the involved parties and any responsibility pursued officially. Meanwhile, the UN warned that violence in the area has intensified significantly, with continuous exchanges of fire and shelling between the Israeli army and armed groups in Lebanon, mainly Hezbollah. These clashes are taking place increasingly close to peacekeeper positions, putting them at direct risk. The organization has called on all parties to represent obligations under international law and avoid any actions that could endanger peacekeepers, emphasizing that they are not part of the conflict and should not be targeted. The incident has sparked strong international reactions. Indonesia, the country of the victims, strongly condemned the attacks and demanded a full and transparent investigation, while the UN Secretary General warned that attacks on peacekeepers could constitute serious violations of international humanitarian law, potentially even war crimes. Senior European Union diplomats visited Bucha to honor the massacre victims and show support for Ukraine. The visit coincides with the 4th anniversary of the city's liberation, when serious crimes were uncovered during the Russian occupation. Top European Union diplomats gathered in Ukraine to commemorate the victims of the Bucha massacre and reaffirm support for Kyiv. EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas, along with several foreign ministers from member states, visited the city near the capital, Kyiv, placing candles at the memorial dedicated to victims of the Russian occupation. They also conducted church tributes and joined a moment of reflection for over 400 civilians killed during the occupation. The visit coincides with the 4th anniversary of Bucha's liberation, an event that shocked international opinion as it revealed the extent of the crimes committed during the war. Ukrainian authorities have described it as one of the most severe episodes of violence in Europe since World War II. Ukraine's Foreign Minister, Andriy Sybiha, stated that there is a growing international support for establishing a special tribunal for crimes of aggression against Ukraine. He noted that some countries have expressed willingness to join its initiative, which aims to bring justice for crimes committed during the conflict. Meanwhile, Russia has made it clear that it will not recognize such a tribunal and considers participation in it an act of hostility. The visit by European diplomats comes amid international EU tensions regarding ongoing assistance to Ukraine. Nevertheless, their presence in Bucha sends a strong political and symbolic message of continued support for Ukraine and commitment to seeking justice for war victims. Republican Governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, has signed a law to rename Palm Beach International Airport in honor of President Donald Trump. This decision follows a series of other initiatives where Trump's name has been placed on buildings, institutions, and government programs. Republican Governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, has signed a law to rename Palm Beach International Airport after President Donald Trump. The decision follows the approval of a plan for a presidential library in Miami and is part of a wave of initiatives placing Trump's name on government buildings, programs, warships, and even U.S. currency. Trump, born in New York, moved to Florida in 2019 and currently resides at his Mar-a-Lago resort in West Palm Beach. To make this name change official, approval from the Federal Aviation Administration and updates to airport signage and flight databases are required. Recently, a legislative proposal also aims to change the airport's 3-letter code from PBI to DJT, reflecting Trump's initials. In addition to the airport, his name already appears on a planned class of Navy ships, a visa program for wealthy foreigners, a government pharmaceutical page, and cultural and financial institutions such as the John F. Kennedy Center and U.S. Institute of Peace. Earlier this month, a federal art panel approved a gold coin featuring Trump's portrait as part of a coin series commemorating America's 250th anniversary. This is all we have prepared for you today. To never miss an update, follow us on social media, subscribe on YouTube, and check us out on our webpage at www.nsm.tv. www.nsmtv.ca. Thank you for joining us.